thank you for that. That was really amazing.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's funny because I read way too many, quote unquote band bios, and what jumped out at me, obviously I'm listening to your EP and everything, but just how detailed it was in terms of how your songwriting process is. That the inspirations kind of come literally from everywhere. Um, so I wanted, especially the song that you just played, I'd love you to just kind of share with, how that kind of came about, but also other tracks on your EP, because it is very interesting.
Thanks. Yeah, so the song I played, Better Angels, was inspired by Abraham Lincoln's inaugural address on the eve of the Civil War, in which he talks about the better angels of our nature. And this was during one of the most divisive times in our nation's history. And Lincoln had optimism in humanity's better qualities, that humanity would come together, that um, to create a more perfect union again. And so I was in a car listening to a radio interview with Jon Meacham, who had just written a book about those instances in American history where we've come up against some of the greatest crises. And historically, we've always risen above um, these crises and come together and became stronger as a result. So listening to this interview, it gave me this hope that I hadn't felt in years. And at the time, it was 2018 when the crisis at the border was going on, and children were being ripped from their parents, and people were being detained along the border. Children were separated from their parents and put in cages. And it just seemed like, I mean, as a nation, we're in despair watching all of this happen, wondering what we can do, what this says about us, and it seems so wrong. And these words just really inspired me to write the song Better Angels, because it did seem, yeah, throughout American history that we really have risen to the occasion and have enlisted our better angels to help us do so.
Um, it's extremely timely for right now. I think that's why I thought initially that you might have written this a little bit more recent. But
Yeah.
I mean, it is strange how things happen, like right now, where, in the time we're living in. But I don't want to like kind of speed past the initial question, like, some of the other songs that you wrote on the album inspired by documentary that you watched, or, a journal, right?
Yeah. Woody
Journal.
Guthrie's journal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is very interesting how inspiration just can kind of come from, I don't want to say the least likely places, but where you're just not expecting it, and it kind of comes to you. Like, I'm sure you didn't expect to write a song based off of hearing a story about Abraham Lincoln.
Right. No, definitely. I mean, my songs tend to be, I mean, I think there are hopeful qualities in them and universal themes that, are helpful in trying times. But the Better Angels was really the first overtly optimistic song I've ever written, and sort of uncharacteristic. So yeah, I think it just it goes to show how, if you're open to it as a songwriter, anything can sort of infiltrate, or can sort of inspire a song, inspire that songwriting muse in us to write about things normally we wouldn't be inclined to.
I've been it's been kind of a common theme with some other people I've been talking to, and I can relate to, because I'm a writer and blah blah blah. I found early on in the pandemic, and still, I mean, we're in the middle of it, or wherever we're at in the stage of wherever it is. it's very hard to be inspired if you're an artist or whatever to want to create anything. um,
Yes.
so I'm curious how, I mean, I felt that way, especially March and April, where I just didn't want to do anything because I wasn't, it's very hard to be inspired by anything when there's nothing to be inspired by. So I'm just curious where you're at. You were saying, that song was hopeful. You said there's kind of a theme of hopefulness. Um, there has been some hopefulness in the world, depending on, where you look at it. But I'm just curious where you've been artistically lately.
Yeah, so I like you, when the pandemic first struck and we were seeing all of the amounts of infections and deaths on the rise, it was just so overwhelming. And um, yeah, it was this mixed bag of feeling hopelessness, and which of course isn't the best ingredient for being creative.
Right.
Um, but at the same time, having new music to release and realizing that Better Angels was kind of the perfect song to release in this moment. And I had plans to make a music video that wasn't pandemic or COVID specific, that of course I couldn't do anymore because it meant getting people together and doing like a normal kind of video shoot, and that just wasn't plausible anymore. So my team and I decided that we do a lyric video instead. And the process of doing that really gave me a lot of hope, and was a process I guess I wouldn't have done, I don't think, unless I had new music to release and I had to, create content for it.
Right.
Um, so it was in March where I started taking photos of the essential workers in my life, and it actually came together in a few days. I am not the kind of person that is super extroverted and wants to go out and be like, hey, you don't know me, but can I take your picture
Right.
for this, project I'm doing? And so I walked out of my house to do this sort of shyly, a bit begrudgingly, like, oh, how's this going to go? And my mailman walks right up to my house at that exact moment. So I tell him about the project. I thank him for his work and take his picture. We have a short conversation. And then my chief of police in a small municipality I live in Maryland drives by handing out toilet paper to my neighbors in Cottage City where I live. And so then I go up to him and I tell him the story and thank him and give him and take his picture, and both so far are really enthusiastic to be a part of it. And then the UPS driver who normally drives up, delivers my packages, drives up on my block, just like 10 feet away. And and it's not like he's in a rush. He's like reorganizing his packages. So it like gives me time to like, you know, get the courage to go up to a stranger and ask them. But at that point it was like, man, it's like this video is making itself, and despite myself, despite my own insecurities and shyness. And so at that point I was like, man, this song really needs to be out there. This message really needs to be in the world. And so yeah, that's how the lyric video was created. And then shortly thereafter I released the single.
Hard not to like test out new material, like, or to like kind of fiddle with new ideas, you being an artist,
Yeah.
while, there's so much stuff going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I have the good fortune um, of being engaged to a musician, and we make music incredibly well together. I think it's kind of like a litmus test for our relationship, in a way. So combination of that, and also, I don't know if you feel this way, but whenever I release new music, it kind of feels like like an emotional release,
Right.
and it kind of clears the way for new
Right.
creative content for new music to enter into the world or into my mind or in, being played through my guitar or singing. So actually last weekend, my fiance John and I both kind of like fleshed out two different ideas that I'd been thinking of for years, just melodies, things that I just haven't gotten out of my head. But I think that also reflect my my general just feeling in this moment of kind of like helplessness, of feeling depressed and anxious and not knowing exactly how to deal with those feelings when we're all cooped up and we don't have the distractions that we're used to. It's been this moment has made creating music hard, but at the same time, I think it's kind of this interesting moment where I've released new music during a difficult time, which has sort of opened up the channel for me to create more music. So it's an interesting mix.
It'll be very interesting because like I feel, and like so many of us, like we're living through this war, really, this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think whenever it's over, you know, we're gonna have this kind of PTSD kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's gonna be, at least for me, I'm just speaking for me. I think that's when my outlet will begin. I think that's when my writing will really kick in, and the therapy and the therapeutic stuff will come out, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you know, I lived through this, and you know, now I can kind of let it out. I think that's more to do with the pandemic than, you know, the racial injustice, which is unfortunately not going to go away when the pandemic ever goes away. You know,
Yeah,
so
that's a sad reality,
yeah,
right?
yeah, but yeah. Anyway, you know, it's a downer. It's such a tough thing, because I don't really want to ever veer off into the world is such a shitty place, but it's just there. So
Yeah, and I think it's a moment, especially as artists. I think that it's kind of a gift in a way, even though no one wants to see any of this happen.
yeah,
But it's a gift in a way because artists have always been the storytellers, the people who kind of like oracles can sort of make sense of otherwise nonsensical or really difficult situations. So I just think it's a chance to really take that responsibility as an artist to heart. Um, and as yeah, I saw a quote recently that said, "We don't need more successful people in the world anymore. We need artists. We need healers. Um, we need storytellers." Because we're in this moment where we need healing, where we need reckoning, where we need people to make sense of what's happened, because like you said, it's like we're going through a war. At least my generation, it's sometimes I wake up, it just seems surreal, it's like things that you read about in the history books of the New Deal, and of women working in factories when the men are out at war, and and rationing, and like all of these things that just seemed like, even though my grandparents lived through it, it still seems like a world away, like, oh, that would never happen
I
now.
know,
And
I know.
it's like, whoa. Famous last words, like we're really going through something.
I do think, and then I'll let you go. But I do think that, you know, and we're at two opposite ends here, because I have no musical ability whatsoever, but and you do, but when you take the stage, the euphoria that you're going to have whenever, you are back on stage, but the euphoria that I'm going to have by just the lights dimming. And I think
Yeah.
that it's just going to be so indescribable, that feeling when you go back to that first show, for the artist and for the concert goer. And I do think whether it's film or I'm hopeful, whether it's film, TV, music, I think that some of the best work is just, hopefully, when this is all done, I mean, it's really ahead of us. I really truly believe that, you know.
Mhm.
All right, you take care, you stay safe, and all that good stuff.
Thanks. You do the same, John. Yeah, and thanks again for having me. It's been a great conversation. Thanks.
My pleasure. All right, Lauren, take care.
Okay, you too.
All right, bye bye.